The history of video games dates back to the 50s, but it wasn't until the 70s and the 80s that video games really took off with mainstream audiences. Now, over the years, there's been plenty of devs and creators who have produced some absolutely amazing hardware. But on the flip side of that, there's some that have created utter failures, all of which have pretty much disappeared from existence. Many of the items on this list are failed controllers, others are failed consoles, and others failed gaming gimmicks. So with that in mind, let's jump into our list of the top 10 gaming items that no longer exist. Starting us off in at number 10, the Atari MindLink. The Atari MindLink promised players that it could read their minds, allowing you to control your video games with the power of your brain. In reality, it was just a headband that read the mioneural signal voltage from the player's forehead movements with infrared sensors, which would then be translated into movement in the game that they were playing. Created for the Atari 2600, it was never actually released, with testing for the controller showing that players would get frequent headaches while using it, since it required them to move their eyebrows a lot in order to play. Up next, number 9, the PlayStation Mouse. You know what makes perfect sense? Using a mouse to play console games. So, for context, back in the day, good old 1992, the SNES released a mouse that you could use for the game Mario Paint. Sony was like, hey, we could totally do that too. Problem was, the PlayStation was a different kind of console for a different kind of user base. Those who had Nintendo consoles often were a younger demographic, and drawing games were much more appealing to them. Those who had a PlayStation were the kinds of people who preferred shooting, racing, and action games. So the PlayStation mouse didn't really appeal to them, making it a bit of a commercial failure. And the games that did benefit from having a mouse were all ones that people preferred to play on PC anyway. In our number 8 spot, the Noventa Falcon. Just looking at the Noventa Falcon is a bit baffling. The controller had a good core concept, but was executed rather poorly. Perhaps it was ahead of its time. Essentially, it was a controller made to replace a mouse that had a motor pushing on its handle. So you'd not only get a lot of feedback from it, but it also gave a better range of motion. So what was the problem? Well, it was hefty in size. It didn't have a whole lot of games that supported it, and many thought it was much more of an effort than it was worth, since you would have to find a way to mount it while playing. It wasn't overly accessible or user-friendly, but some people still dug it. Back in 2009, Valve actually released updates for Half-Life 2, Portal, and Team Fortress 2 that added game support for the Noventa Falcon. And at number 7, the Nokia Ngage. It's a phone and a game system! Whoa! Although it wasn't really that great of a phone, to be honest. I know, because I actually had one. Essentially, the Nokia Ngage was Nokia's way of trying to take advantage of the idea that mobile gaming was slowly becoming a profitable industry. Except, rather than having something like an app store where you could download games, you would buy separate game cartridges for it, similar to a Game Boy Advance, and be able to take it on the go with you, but also use it to text and call people. They had the right idea, but the execution wasn't that great. As a gaming platform, it wasn't all that bad, minus having a whole lot of unnecessary buttons that made it really busy and messy to play with. But the games itself weren't too shabby. That being said, it never really had any hit titles, since, well, it was a Nokia phone, not a serious gaming console. Up next, number 6, the Resident Evil 4 Chainsaw Controller. This awful controller, developed specifically to play Resident Evil 4, often comes to mind when mulling over what the worst controller in video game history is. An expensive PS2 accessory, it proved to be a lot more difficult to use than the actual PS2 controller when playing the game, even if it did vibrate every time you used it in order to simulate a realistic chainsaw feel. Gets old pretty quick. It even came with a cheesy display that you could mount it on, if you really wanted to show it off, which I guess some people did. Up next, in our number 5 spot, the Konami Laserscope. Another head-mounted game controller on our list here, the Konami Laserscope similarly operated on a stupid premise. It was voice-activated, meaning you would have to yell "fire" over and over again if you wanted to shoot. Initially designed in 1990 for the game Laser Invasion, it was also compatible for other NES Zapper games. But if the look of it didn't already turn you off, the technology was also poorly produced. Many users criticized it for the Laserscope firing whenever you said pretty much any word. Background noise also made it shoot too. In our number 4 spot, the Microsoft Entertainment Pack. Back in the olden days of Windows computers, between the operating systems of 3.1 and XP, part of the bundle that came with your computer when you bought it was the Microsoft Entertainment Pack, which contained a bunch of simple games that were great means of procrastination, especially if you worked in an office or were trying to do something other than write a term paper. From Free Cell to Minesweeper to Chips Challenge, these games have very much lived on in the memories of anyone who had a Windows computer between 1989 and 2001. The Entertainment Pack itself was a product of Microsoft's entry business team, whose job it was to make Windows more appealing to small businesses and homes, since the company was concerned that its operating system's high hardware requirements meant people would only see it as a tool for larger enterprises. The games themselves had a next to nothing budget, since at the time no game developers saw Windows legitimately as a gaming platform. So these games were crafted by Windows employees who had spare time. Up next in our number 3 spot, E.T. the Extraterrestrial. The Atari 2016 E.T. game was a major commercial failure. Based off of the film of the same name, the goal of the game was to guide E.T. through various screens in a cubic world, to collect 3 parts of an interplanetary telephone in order to call home. The game was rushed to completion in 5.5 weeks in order to be ready in time for the 1982 Christmas season, and therefore was mass-produced in order to meet an expected high demand. But it sucked. It is often considered one of the worst games of all time, and many see it as a contributing factor to the video game industry's crash of 1983, which was primarily due to market saturation. A lot of people returned the game in flocks, and because of this, an urban legend was spawned that Atari had buried thousands of unsold cartridges in a New Mexico landfill. And guess what? It was true. In 2013, the site in question underwent an excavation, and they found tons of ET cartridges, along with other Atari games. Apparently, 728,000 copies of ET were buried, and you can actually still hunt down a copy of this game on eBay. Most sellers selling it for pretty cheap, so it's not totally out of existence, but for a brief time, Atari tried really hard to get it out of existence. Up next, number 2, the Nintendo Power Glove. The Power Glove was a controller accessory for the NES, and just by looking at it, you can probably figure out why it's been phased out of existence for the most part, aside from being the butt of a joke every now and then. The Power Glove was intriguing. It made use of some really early VR mechanics, but ultimately was a bit of a commercial failure because it was only supported by 2 games, neither of which came with it. Plus, it was really difficult to use. Now think about it. You're trying to use a gamepad that's awkwardly attached to your wrist. Plus, despite exploring new grounds with VR tech, it was pretty imprecise. Also, the games were called Glove Pilot and Manipulator Glove Adventure, so you can kind of see where the lack of appeal came from. And finally, in our number 1 spot, Battletag. Battletag is one of the more recent video game creations on our list. Some of you may even remember it being showcased at Ubisoft's 2010 E3 press conference, or seen it as a highlight in an awkward montage of E3 moments that are really awkward. So, what is Battletag? Well, it's basically laser tag, but for your home. Players have guns with sensors that they shoot at each other, and your scores would end up on the screen of your PC at the end of the game. But after the press conference, most people were left confused by what exactly Battletag was, since the demonstration was weird as f***. When it was actually released, after months of pretty much zero advertising, it was only shipped out to 15 Toys R Us in the US, in Texas specifically, and Zeller's stores in Canada, a chain that is now dead. Alright, there we have it, friends. Have you guys ever come across any of these items? Or owned any yourselves? And if you could buy one of these for yourself, which one would you get? Give us a shout in those comments below and let us know. If you dug this video, hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe to Top 10 Gaming before you go for all things video games, from lists to news to updates and more. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll catch you on the next video.